indeed, if we study the annals of the European civilization, we shall read upon the brightest page of ancient history that inscription of Christianism. Liberty of the slaves. The brightest page of intermediate history offers that inscription of philosophy. Enfranchisement of the serfs. And at the end of the last century, the contemporary history inscribed in its turn upon the brightest page, emancipation of the non-proprietors. That third idea, omitted without a palliative in the Code of Concourse, but immediately effaced under the blood and the dirt, 1793 was revived and wisely put in practice by the legislators of Brumaire. It traversed in silence the empire and the restoration. It arises today more powerful and more ripe. Glory to the government sufficiently enlightened to preside with courage over this third development of religion and philosophy. I will here treat of the great question of the political rights to be accorded to the non-proprietors and refute, article by article, the 9th and 10th chapters of a work entitled The 2 Years' Reign by Alphonse Pepin. But I will refer that refutation to my second volume, where it will naturally be brought by my legislative discussions upon the lists of notability. Let us be contented in observing today that until Brumaire, notwithstanding all the declarations of their rights, they had been fearful of granting the right of citizenship to the poorest and most numerous classes. They had confined themselves to enfranchising the burghers of the town and country and exacting a quit rent of several days' work, or a revenue of several hundreds of pounds. Instead of equally fortifying the two chambers, they had equally weakened them in admitting to the democratic election but a minority of the society, and in leaving the conservative chamber without means of resistance against that bastard democracy. Our diverse essays of electoral sense, renewed since, and more or less enlarged, are equally sufficient, for the question is not the imitating the emancipation of such a class, but to dare to generalize it, and to know how to do it without overturning. It is in that view that after having consecrated the direct exercise of the universal suffrage in the commune, we submitted that exercise out of the commune to several degrees of delegation, as soon as it was necessary to name them to functions that included a district, department, the whole republic. We established the necessity of modifying the principle. How in that case could they, without inconvenience, apply the universal direct suffrage? How should 5 or 6 millions of men understand one another sufficiently to exercise this right without intermediates? How should citizens, the greatest part of whom have never been out of their district, make a good choice beyond the limits where their habitudes retain them? Can they know the aptness of such or such a citizen for the high places of the administration of the judicature of the elected chamber? The greatest part of those voters have most probably never seen the candidates, and perhaps scarcely heard speak of them. Experience, as well as reflection, shows that direct voting in such a case would be difficult and dangerous. Here the exception becomes applicable. Society will find the utility and convenience of delegating its power to electors, and the universal suffrage directing the commune would be indirect, more or less, for the high functions, indirect for the high functions, I grant it. But all the citizens, without exception, should delegate this right of suffrage, and all can receive the delegation. All, admitting the smallest sense, is to acknowledge 2 nations in 1 nation when 2 people, enemies, the Franks and the Gauls, inhabited Gaul. The feudal legislation only confirmed the existing fact, but today, that the existing fact is the unity, is it not absurd to seek to destroy that unity by the legislation of the electoral sense? The indirect suffrage is the more perfect, being nearer to the direct suffrage, from whence it springs. If the electors are constrained to choose the high functionaries among themselves, it is evident that the delegation would be less absolute. For that restriction, the electors chosen by all, and amongst them would be at the same time the delegates and the candidates of the direct universal suffrage. After these popular considerations, see as established, first, that each primary assembly, composed of every Frenchman that was of age, should choose in its bosom 1/10 of its number as notables of the commune. It should then choose amidst those notables the public functionaries of that commune. Second, the notables of all the communes of a district united in the chief place of the under-prefecture should name the tenths amongst them as notable of the district. They should afterwards choose in this tenth the public functionaries of that district. Third, the notables of all the districts of a department united in the chief place of the prefecture should name amongst them the tenth of their number as notables of the department. They should then choose in this tenth the public functionaries of the department. Fourth, the reunion of all the lists of notables of the departments arising to nearly 6,000 names would form the great national list, in which they should choose the members of the Tribunal of Cassation, the deputies, the senators, and the consuls. Here then is the system which they have denied, calumniated, and misconstrued. That was, they said, very complicated. Without doubt, nothing is more complicated than real liberty in a great society accustomed to servitude. But in requital, nothing is more simple than the despotism of a man or an assembly.